You've spelunked into the Mat Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Mat Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, week 1 is in the books. How did all three schools do? How did they look? And what should they look out for moving forward? Well, you came to the right place if you were looking to answer those questions. I'll cover the victories of the Utes, Cougars, and Aggies. I will also talk about the victory of Real Salt Lake over New England Revolution, a very much needed win for the Real Salt Lakers. What do we call ourselves, by the way? The Realers? The RSLers? I'm just going to say the boys from Real Salt Lake, I guess. RSL. And a little bit about World of Warcraft. I guess you can't really ever get back to its peak, but I'll talk about where it is right now and how I feel about it. But again, thank you all so much for being here. As always, follow me on the socials. That is at the Mat Cave Pod over on X. And then you can find my Facebook page, the Mat Cave Podcast. And then there's also my Twitch TV streaming channel. It is twitch.tv/Matts, M-A-T-T-S, Cave. I stream every weeknight from around 6 p.m. Mountain Time to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And recently I've been having a lot of fun with Final Fantasy XIV. That is probably what I'll continue to keep playing, and then when I get bored of that, I'll change it up. And then last thing here, please, like you always do, rate, review, share, all of that good stuff. Leave a comment wherever it is, however you listen. It means the world to me, and I appreciate everything that you guys have done for me. All right, Spelunkers, let's head into this. So first, let's talk about the first game of the week. That would be your Utah Utes going up against Southern Utah. Not really a barn burner, this one. And it never really was close to being one. Cam Rising is back, and he's back in a big way. But I do want to point this out. It's Southern Utah. It's a great tune-up game. Wonderful warm-up to get Cam Rising back into game action. But the real test is this coming week. Same thing with BYU and Utah State. I'll get to them in a moment. But Utah did what they were supposed to do. As a college football playoff favorite, they showed up and they blanked the Thunderbirds. And not only did they blank them, they removed any doubt from the game in early second quarter. The Southern Utah offense could get nothing going at all. They barely had 150 yards of total offense. That's impressive stuff. I mean, even if you put in those third and fourth stringers like Utah eventually did towards the end of the game, that's still impressive to get the shutout and to keep them below 200 yards of total offense. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about my pick. But I'm not feeling great about my sleeper pick. I know it's only the first week, but no, Mike Pittman, where are you, bud? But anyway, Dijon Stanley. This guy, and get ready for the mustard puns, because I'm not going to say them, but all throughout the season, you know those announcers are going to do it. They're not going to be able to help themselves. So he had himself a day. 184 yards of total offense. On 3 catches, he had 150 yards. 2 of them were the exact same play. It was a wheel route out of the backfield, and Southern Utah had no idea what was going on. They didn't know which end was up on those plays. So the great play calling by Andy Ludwig there. And Cam Rising, Brant Keithy. What more can you say about these guys? Like they personify Utah football. Brant Keithy got the hat trick, 3 touchdown catches, and Cam Rising in only 2 quarters worth of work. 10 of 15, 254 yards, and 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's pretty darn good, if you ask me. And I don't think he was sacked either. No, he wasn't. He wasn't even sacked. Yeah, so Utah's going to be okay. Next game up for the Utes is, well, it's Baylor. And it's at home. So that's very good news. For Cam Rising, for the Utah program, that's fantastic news. 1:30 p.m. on Fox. It should be a win for Utah. It really should be. Baylor is struggling. They've struggled since 2021, 2022 when they won the Big 12. They aren't that great anymore. And Utah really needs to put the screws to them. And I think they will. But, my goodness. Week 1, everybody wins. I like that. I like that. Everybody goes home a winner. Next game up, BYU against Southern Illinois. Interesting fact about the Salukis, they have the record for the most wins against an FBS foe by an FCS team. Period. They hold that record. I think they have 5 as a program. So it's not like it was a walk in the park or a cupcake. At least that was the verbiage going into this game. BYU wins this one comfortably, 41-13. I was not impressed by Jake Retzlaff. 20 of 30, 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he was sacked a couple times. Gary Bohannon did get in at the very end of the game, but it was just to run out the clock. Spelunkers, this is going to be a rough year for you Cougar fans out there. Jake Retzlaff missed. All 10 throws were misses. They weren't drops. They were misses. And the ones that you could consider drops, when I watched them, they weren't really drops. It was more on the quarterback than it was the receiver. Cody Epps dropped a pass. My guy, Keanu Hill, dropped a pass. But if the quarterback would have placed it just a little bit better, those would have been catches. Chase Roberts is a freak. He's going to have a massive year. 7 grabs, 108 yards. No touchdowns, but that's because JoJo Phillips went nuts. 2 huge plays to JoJo Phillips, 2 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. But Jake Retzlaff, I don't feel like he's ever comfortable in the pocket. It almost feels like a Johnny Manziel type thing where he's just waiting for the pocket to collapse so that he can get outside. But when he does get outside, anytime he throws on the run, it's not a good throw. It's not an accurate throw. There were a couple of throws, one in particular in the third quarter, where he could have kept the drive alive, and he threw it like 10 yards behind Chase Roberts, who was coming back to him. And then he missed 2 deep balls, one to Parker Kingston, the other to, I believe it was JoJo Phillips. No, it was Keelan Marion. Excuse me. It was Keelan Marion deep. And those would have both been easy touchdowns if Jake Retzlaff were a BYU quarterback. If he was Cam Rising, those were touchdowns. So he could have had a 7-touchdown day, could have had an all-time day as a BYU quarterback, but I don't have any trust in this kid to be able to guide BYU to a bowl game. The defense, against an athletic quarterback, which they're going to be playing every week, they're donezo. There's nothing they can do to stop an athletic quarterback. DJ Williams, the starting quarterback of Southern Illinois, not really touted as a passer, and that kind of showed in this game, but he ran for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. The run defense isn't fixed, and that's what they were touting about from spring practice and fall practice, that it was more physical than it's ever been, and they wanted to get toughness, they wanted to get bigger, they wanted to stop the run. I didn't see it against this quarterback. I did see it against the running backs when they actually handed it off, but they only did that about 9 times. Against better competition, we're going to have to see. The jury is completely out on BYU. Everybody was talking about, they want to prove that they actually belong in the Big 12, that they were 2 wins away from having a winning record on the season. They hung tough with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. That's all true. But against Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel went out, and so they were against a backup. I know you can only play who's in front of you, but that's a big part of it. Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon ran all over them. All over them. And that's not going to change this year, I don't think. Overall, not impressed. The 1 interception they got was on a bad throw by the Southern Illinois quarterback. It was just basically playing, it was a pop-up. The receiver fell out of bounds after some physical cover. Could have been a flag, could have not been a flag. It was a 50-50 call, and they got the pick, So, Jacob Robinson, his tally's on the board. They got 2 sacks in this. That's something we never heard last season. But again, it's an FCS opponent. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to get more sacks than just that. So if we were to compare the stats of Utah and Southern Illinois, we will have a better picture of what it's supposed to look like. Utah got 5 sacks against an FCS opponent, whereas BYU only got 2. That's the gap that's between these two schools. And as you can tell, I spent more time talking about BYU because there's more things wrong with BYU than there are with Utah. With Utah, they did suffer an injury on the outside. They're deeper than they were last year, obviously, just because everybody got playing time on that team. For BYU, no significant injuries, but I don't know. It's good to hear that Jay Hill is doing okay, though. If you aren't aware, defensive coordinator for BYU, Jay Hill, wasn't feeling well after practice Thursday evening, and he went to the hospital, and it turned out he had a heart attack. And I don't want to go into it. I've seen different reporting about what actually happened. I'll keep that between Jay Hill and his doctors. I'm not going to speculate. But anytime it's anything with a heart, especially in football where it's high pressure, you got to be careful. But he was at the game with his wife. He looked okay, but that is something else to monitor as we go throughout the season. Just more stuff that BYU has to put up with. Parker Kingston needs to do a better job of keeping his head on a swivel. I'm just going to say that. Last year, he got blasted by Kobe Bryant of Kansas, and he needs to do a better job of that. I'm just going to throw that out there. All right. Overall, another victory is another victory. BYU is the only school in the state of Utah that is perfect against FCS opponents. They are 19-0 all time. I guess that's a stat you can take with you. You know, I'm full of useless stats. You got more. Let's move on to the Aggies. Utah State played against Robert Morris, and at the end of the first half, it was looking pretty murky. 14-10, the Colonials were up on the Aggies, and then they made the switch at quarterback due to Spencer Petras getting injured, and that seemed to change things dramatically. Bryson Barnes is more mobile than Spencer Petras, and obviously we saw that. Bryson Barnes had 5 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. It's pretty good. And then my guy, Robert Briggs Jr., 9 carries, 88 yards, 0 touchdowns, long of 55 yards. There's your season. Unfortunately, at the end of that 55-yard run, he had to be carted off the field, and it's looking like a fractured or broken leg. That stinks. So there goes my X factor for the Aggies after week 1. Oh boy. Overall, though, that first half with Spencer Petras might cause a change here for the Aggies. It could be Bryson Barnes starting now. We'll have to see what goes on with the health of Spencer Petras as well as what's going on in practice. But it looks like it's going to be Bryson Barnes, the pig farmer, taking over for Spencer Petras. I'm sure Iowa Hawkeyes fans are shocked by that development. If you aren't aware, Iowa struggled to score touchdowns the past 3 seasons. Their defense, I think, almost scored more touchdowns than their offense over the course of that time. And Spencer Petras was the quarterback during that. So I had to throw that little dig in there. We'll have to see what's going forward. So going forward, I'm going to hop back to BYU really quick. As you can tell, I'm not playing the fight songs this week because I keep flipping back and forth between the teams. I'll get better as we go along. Don't worry. Next up for BYU is SMU in Dallas-Fort Worth on a Friday night. That'll be interesting. SMU came off of a very weak Week 0 win, and then they blew the doors off of their opponents in Week 2. That was an FCS opponent. Now it's BYU versus SMU. SMU is one of the most recent schools to step up in competition, whereas BYU was last year. I don't know. It's a coin toss on this one. If I were a betting man, I'd stay far away from this game. You can't tell who's going to win. You're not going to know which SMU team is going to show up, and Jake Retzlaff has yet to beat an FBS opponent. There's so much weirdness going on this season, obviously with all of the transfers and the NIL stuff, and then you have the changing conferences. It's a very weird year, but especially weird at BYU where when there is not quarterback stability, BYU rarely does well. When you go back in the annals of history, you can tell that whenever the quarterback position is unsettled at BYU, the team does not perform. And Kalani Sitake did the best he could last season, trying to plug a hole after Jaron Hall left for the NFL draft because, well, he graduated. And he did it with Keaton Slovis. I thought that was a weird fit because Keaton Slovis isn't mobile. And that offensive line, oh boy, it got a little bit better this season, but we're going to see again this week, just like we will with Utah State and Utah, really where they're at. when they play real competition. But next up, SMU for BYU. For Utah State, though, a little bit more difficult than BYU. It's USC in the Coliseum at 9 p.m. Mountain Time. That's a really late kickoff, too. Utah State is kind of used to that, though, playing in the Mountain West. Mountain West is always now, Mountain West will be now the late games as we move forward. But I want Utah State to pull off the upset so bad. I'm not a fan of Lincoln Riley's teams. And if they follow the blueprint of what BYU, of what Utah's done to them over the past few seasons, even what BYU did to them a couple of seasons ago, you go physical against USC, you got a chance because they got a very soft underbelly. I'm not saying the upset is something you should bet on, but if the odds are, so far against Utah State, put a $5 on it. Might make some money. All right, so that is the college football for this week. Utah, BYU, Utah State all winning against FCS competition. BYU, the only school in the state of Utah that is undefeated against FCS competition, 19-0. And Utah made the statement they needed to make against lesser competition, and now they head into their schedule proper. It'll still be a very, very fun and exciting year for all three schools. With Utah State, it's trying to see what they can salvage, what kind of fight they have. And then with BYU, it's, are they ready for the big time yet? I said last season it would take 3 to 5 years, just like it kind of did with Utah. It took about 4. And then Utah, coming in as the favorite, how do you react when you're wearing the crown? That's never happened. I'm not going to say never. That hasn't happened to Utah since, I would say, the Mountain West, really. Because in the Pac-12, it was always, Utah's really solid, but USC's got this talent, so USC's still the favorite. Or Oregon, or even Washington or UCLA. So Utah's got the crown now, and everybody's going to be coming for them. It'll be interesting to see how they react to that, because they play the underdog role to perfection. Okay, so let's move on to Real Salt Lake. It has been a very rough run of form for Real Salt Lake recently. If you're unaware, Real Salt Lake hasn't won a game since early July. There's a lot of factors that go into that. They've only played like 3 games. They've lost 2-0 to San Jose. Oof. San Jose is probably the worst team in MLS. And then they lost before that to Houston 3-0. Houston is towards the bottom of the standings. But they got one back against New England. The Revs, as they're called, the New England Revolution, also a bottom feeder team. They're 26 points at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Not technically eliminated from anything, but they're trending that direction. And Real Salt Lake did this without Chicho Arango. Chicho Arango did not play. He was not even named to the squad. I believe he's dealing with an injury. But it didn't really look like it mattered. We had goal scoring from Anderson Julio and Philip Quinton. Anderson Julio is still continuing his awesome run of form when he plays. And Real Salt Lake 2-0 over New England Revolution, which puts Real Salt Lake back into third place, 3 points ahead of Colorado, and only 5 points back of the Galaxy. So they're tied right now with LAFC, technically, but LAFC has only played 25 games, whereas Real Salt Lake's played 27. So there's more points on the table for LAFC than there is for Real Salt Lake. But Real Salt Lake is practically a lock for the playoffs, which is awesome. I did not think that was going to happen this year. Nobody thought that was going to happen this year. And if they tell you otherwise, they're lying to you. This is awesome because also LA Galaxy, LAFC, Inter Miami all have big, huge money transfers coming in. Whereas Real Salt Lake had a record transfer going out with Andres Gomez, and then they brought in some solid pieces, but no home run swings. Nobody that is heading into the retirement home like those other clubs. Marco Royce for the Galaxy, Hugo Lloris for LAFC, stuff like that. Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Sergio Busquets, all those guys, Jordi Alba for Inter Miami. It's a retirement home. MLS is a retirement home. Real Salt Lake isn't buying into that. and they're trying to craft a sustainable club, not a 1 season or 2 season surge. And I can appreciate that. I like that a lot. That's how my favorite club in the world, Arsenal, built up from their disastrous runs under different managers, but now under the one they have. They've built it up very well, and now they can just kind of put the cherry on top of the club that they have. So that's what I hope Real Salt Lake is doing. And who knows, maybe in the offseason they can swap Chicho Arango out for another club record fee, and they can start bringing in some names that you might have heard from Europe. Who knows? But right now we're looking at Real Salt Lake in third place. They're trending to be about third. I was hoping they would win the Western Conference, but dropping those 2 games against middling competition, that's bad news for any team wanting to win first place. And it does look like Inter Miami is going to win the President's Trophy, which goes to the team that has the most points at the end of the season, regardless of conference. They're at 59. Next closest is 52. So, all right. One last thing I wanted to bring up. I did talk about Robert Briggs Jr. injury earlier. I just want to wish him all the best. Swift recovery. A broken, fractured leg at the end of an awesome run. That's tragic. So I want him. I wish him all the best. He's so much fun to watch. Get well soon. I just felt like I had to say that. Now, lastly, let's talk video games. I haven't done that in a couple weeks now, but what I've been playing, obviously on stream, I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV, Dawn Trail expansion. It is fantastic. If you're looking to get into either MMO that I'm going to talk about tonight, there's no better time than right now. Both expansions are super fun. The mixed reviews you're seeing for Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, don't listen to them. It's just sour grapes. Fans not thinking, oh, it was a quickly run out thing. They didn't really hash out the story. I thought the story was just fine. I really did. And the gameplay itself, I love it. It's great. It is introductory to new players as well as returning players. The fights, you can see everything happen. They do a wonderful job of explaining what happens. Instead, unlike World of Warcraft, where in World of Warcraft they do explain it while it's happening, though, and there's not really any huge alert that goes off. Like you see the opponent or the enemy in World of Warcraft like breathing in, and so you go, okay, I need to go around them. In Final Fantasy, you can see them breathing in, but you can also see a cast bar that they're casting something, and then there's also an indicator, a bright flashing indicator where that's going to happen, so you have more opportunity to move. And in Final Fantasy, it's almost a sliding scale of difficulty. The closer you get to the end game content, the less time you have to react to those things, so it does feel like there's a greater challenge. When, as a World of Warcraft player myself heading into Final Fantasy, it almost felt like a joke, because it was like, all right, how does anybody get hit by anything? And if you've watched any of my streams over the past month or so, you can see how people get hit by stuff. I've died a lot. And so it's super fun on both sides. So Final Fantasy XIV I did a review for about a month ago. Absolutely get it. If you're thinking about getting into an MMORPG and you're afraid of toxicity, Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn, that community is amazing. Now, let me switch gears to World of Warcraft: The War Within. When this was announced, I was tepidly excited. I'm always excited by a new expansion by Blizzard for World of Warcraft because I hope every time, maybe they'll fix it this time. Maybe it'll be like Legion or like Mists of Pandaria, where it was fun, where it was challenging, where there was enough stuff to do, but I didn't need to be a guy who puts in 90 hours a week playing the game to get to that stuff. They've done so good this time. If you're looking to get back into World of Warcraft, this is it. This is when you need to do it. There's so much stuff, and it's so simple to understand. I don't want to call it easy, but it's so simple to understand and get with, and there's so much single-player content that you don't really need to go out and find a community or find a guild to join. You can still enjoy this expansion just by doing the soloable content. I love both expansions. I love both games. This is bad news for any other games that are coming out or have come out, like Star Wars Outlaws, Black Myth, Wukong. I want to play those games. I've been toying with the idea of recording them and putting them on my YouTube channel. But Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft War Within have all just absorbed my attention in a very good way. I love both of these games. I encourage you, if you're looking to get into either of them, go full bore. Do it. Don't buy a character boost for either game. One of the streamers I watch, his name is Pirate Software, is the name of his channel. His name is Thor. And that is actually his name. And he says, you're spending money to play the game. Don't spend more money to play less of the game. So that's what a character boost does. Right now, Final Fantasy is charging, I believe, $39.99 to get a job, as they call it, up to level 7 or level 80, I believe, which is the start of the expansion. Same thing with World of Warcraft. Only World of Warcraft is $60 for your character progression to get there. Just enjoy the game. There's no race here. And that's what's been lost on the community. Because all of these streamers and these world-first racing guilds hog up all of the attention because they're fun to watch. They really are. I watch the world-first attempts for Destiny 2. I watch the world-first attempts for World of Warcraft and the mythic rating that they do. I watch those. They're fun. It's a race. It's a competition, and it's great. It is great. But everybody who watches that feels like they need to be a part of that too. Like there's some FOMO going on. There's not. Newsflash, the average player isn't going to be in those guilds. The average player isn't going to see that content, really. So my advice to you, if you are a returning player, if you are a new player, just enjoy the content. There is no race. Go at your own speed. Enjoy it. For context, I've just been doing side quests, and this is in World of Warcraft. I've just been doing side quests and the main storyline questing, and it took me, I want to say 8-ish hours, almost 9 hours to get from level 70 to level 80. That's on the slow side. There's faster ways to do it. You can find the videos online. But I've had so much fun doing it the way I want to do it. And Blizzard has done a great job in this expansion allowing you to do it that way. In Final Fantasy XIV, they have crafted their leveling around the main story quest, which means you are going to have to watch the story, be a part of the story. And I love that these two games are so different on how they do it. Because in World of Warcraft, it's entirely conceivable that you can level up from level 70 to level 80 and not touch the main story. If you want to unlock everything, you have to do the main story, but you can go around it. In Final Fantasy, you can try to do that, but you won't unlock any dungeons. You won't get any sort of like significant experience boosts, and you won't unlock any of the side stuff to get, extra mounts or minions or swag for your property. All of this is to say, and I'm going to say it again, one game is not better than the other. They are different games within the same genre. That's about all you can say about Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft. You can like one more than the other. That's perfectly fine. I have a longer history with World of Warcraft, but at the moment, I'm having a lot more fun with Final Fantasy. 24-year-old Matt inside of me here is screaming at me saying that, but it's true. That's why I'm streaming it. And then I'm playing World of Warcraft in my downtime. So just go out there and enjoy your games. Whether it's the ones I'm playing or not, that's fine. If you're enjoying what you're playing, even if it's a game from 10 years ago, I'm so glad you're enjoying your game. So please just continue playing it. Who cares if it's the newest, hottest thing? You're not a streamer. I'm a streamer, and I'm not even doing that. All right, that's the show this week, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to get in contact with me, you got my socials out there at the Matt Cave Pod on X, the Matt Cave Podcast on Facebook and YouTube, and then there's also Matt's Cave, twitch.tv/Matt's Cave on Twitch to watch me stream every night. And thank you again for listening. You're an awesome human being. Don't ever forget it. And I'll see you next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.